I guess we'll get started. So, first of all, I want to tell you I'm not a public speaker, and this is kind of traumatic for me. And that's why I think I've chosen art as a way of communication, as a lot of us do. My voice isn't very strong, and so let me know, raise your hand or something if you can't hear me, and I will start yelling. I was told that I should write my name up here so that I don't forget it, because that's how traumatic this is. So my name is Donna Thomas, and I know a lot of you. I've been mainly a watercolor and acrylics painter in the Missoula area for quite a few years now. I'm a signature member of the Montana Watercolor Society, and I've had work in shows and galleries in Helena, Great Falls, and Missoula. And I've been in several national shows. I was with Sutton West for many, many years, about, I'd say 26 years, until they closed. And since that time, I had a change of life. I looked after my aging mother, and so I kind of toned down the artwork for a while, but I'm gearing up to come back now. My association with Walter Hook, it was as a student many years ago, like 40 years ago, in the 1970s. He was my calligraphy and watercolor professor. Walter was a very inspiring instructor who held his students spellbound at every session. We were all mesmerized by his teaching. He kept us spellbound. At that time, the 60s influence, many of the profs were pretty laid back. Hey man, just do what you feel. But we couldn't do what we felt because we had no technical training. So it was a little different, and I hope it's better now. But Walter was very helpful, and he prepared very carefully his lesson plans. His classes were much more interesting than the other painting professors, and I think he knew it, and so did everyone else. He always came to class very well prepared with an awesome demonstration, which had required a fair amount of preliminary work. His demos were always different and unique, not the same old traditional watercolor techniques at the time, but he was always experimenting. And he would introduce us to a lot of new and unusual experiments. The classes were not only instructive, but very entertaining. He would intersperse his careful explanations of his techniques and colors with a bit of philosophy and wit. And his classes were very, very casual, yet informative, and he seemed always at ease. His demos were so inspiring that we couldn't wait to try out the same techniques that he always showed us. For instance, he would do a painting, and he'd go to a craft store, and there's something called crackle, and he would cover the painting with crackle, and he'd let it dry, and then the finish would just break up like an old china piece. And then he would take oil paint, brown oil paint, and cover it, and then wipe it off. And so the cracks would have these ancient looking brown cracks in it. And it was very interesting. But this is just one example of a lot of the experiments he would do. He'd try anything, and he'd paint on anything. So he always encouraged his students to not paint the same old subjects in the same old way, but to break out and try new techniques and keep branching out into new territory. Generally, we would have a day a week when he would critique our completed works. For the whole quarter, he had tried to get one of his students to break out of the same old rigid style. I think that he finally gave up on that student, and he quit coming to class. However, that same student is now internationally famous and is doing financially better than 95% of us. So, and one of his critiques on my painting, he said, well, this is obviously a copy of some famous painting. And I was very outraged because it was an original from one of my photographs. And so I never said anything to him, but I was fuming. And now I think about it, and I thought it was really a compliment he gave me. So I got over it. And I don't know what happened to that painting. I cannot find it anywhere, and I'm sorry about that. I believe that the true artist is one who can't help the creative processes in his head. Walter illustrated the epitome of the true artist. He created in every medium and in every expression. I think that he saw potential art in everything that he encountered. His mind couldn't help it. He seemed to see whimsy in pieces of wood. He felt the free-form beauty in clay. His abstract expressionism was just that, very expressive. His landscape paintings brought out the essence of the beautiful Northwest, not literally, but by painting his impression of it. And if you've ever seen some of his winter scenes, the colors are very, very vivid. The turquoise water and the branches look almost ominous. And I don't know whether you've ever seen them. There's not too many of them around right now. I'm not sure what happened to them. Don Munt has one of them in his studio. I think it's 709 Ronan or something. Studio 709. You can see a lot of his paintings there. He has quite a collection of them. His later surreal paintings, or more specifically magical realism, brought out his whimsical side, mixing buffalo and eggs on an elegant table. So many crazy unrelated objects, but usually observed by his beloved cats. And the mural which graces the school reminds one of Grant Wood, the Grant Wood era. If you've seen it, it's in the library. It used to be in the lunchroom, but now it's after the renovation here, they stuck it in the library. So if you haven't seen it, go into the library. They have quite a collection of his paintings being shown right now. I love a great many of his works, but the one I have a soft spot in my heart for is his last painting, which is of the houses along the Blackfoot River. And that is also in the library. And I just found out from his daughter, who's in the gym, that one little tiny brown house along the river, which is in the painting, was where he grew up. So if you go back in there, notice which one it is. So I want right now, I wanted to demonstrate to you how he taught. So he would start out with a big sheet of paper, and he did this not every class, but at least once a week. He would bring one of these in, all prepared. So he'd show us the drawing he did, and then he would take that drawing and put the first coat of watercolors in and do as much as he could. And then he'd have the next example. He would take the water, we had taken the watercolor to a certain stage, and then on this one, he would paint on it as much as he could that day, and we'd all be spellbound. We're all watching this. And then he would take the next one as far as he could to the next stage, and then he'd have another one taken to the next stage, and then he'd finish it with a lot of details. So that's what he did at least once a week. And then he would, the next session, we would all just paint, and he would go around and give us individual instruction and suggestions. And then at the last session of the week, he would do a critique. Everyone would bring their things in, and he would give us pointers and how we could change things and what would make it better. And so he prepared quite well for all of his classes. Oh, this is how I started out, taking a photograph and then putting the drawing on, and that's how most of us do it. I chose this subject because this was the last painting he completed, which is the Milltown houses along the river. And I believe that this is the one he grew up in, if you can see. The bigger one, the original, is in the library if you want to see it. So I tried to pay homage to him. Not only was he visually creative, but he was very glib with words. For instance, his UM classes were so captivating that the general public would show up, and they would just drift in, and at first he tried to keep them out, and tell them to leave, and they kept coming, so he just finally gave up. He just let the whole herd in. After all, we were paying tuition, and they were all getting on scot-free. If someone asked a question, and depending how ornery he felt at the time or that day, he would answer with somewhat tongue-in-cheek reply, which is generally regarded as the gospel truth by everyone. He would create a diatribe of verbal gymnastics and just give this very profound explanation, and people would go, oh, yeah. And sometimes he would get this scholar in who would try to explain, well, this is what he meant. You know, this means death, and this means something else. And he'd say, Yes, that's exactly what I meant. When just to be ornery and not bother with it. He once told us that artists were more or less regarded as less than the cream of the crop. But he was regarded as legitimate. He had authority because he had a degree in physics and math, and he had worked in these areas. So he was okay. He was acceptable. He was an artist that was acceptable because he had all this behind him. So the rest of us, you know, were kind of... My personal experience with Walter, he was always so even-tempered and serene. But he always had time for everyone, a very generous man. He always tried to make his work affordable for everyone. When I was a student, I went to his house with the hope of being able to buy a painting. I left with a framed hand-colored print for $20. So he did his own framing and matting, and he just made it affordable for everyone. When a group of former students approached him for an exhibit to fund the old warehouse studios, he came with a generous collection of 25 low-price paintings so that everyone would be able to afford it and help to fund the warehouse. Well, what happened was a collector came in and bought almost all of them. So that took care of all of us poor people who could afford these low-price paintings of his. Walter will always have a special place in my heart. This story just illustrates what a caring and generous person he was. I was what they call a non-traditional student. It was always my longing to go to college and get an art degree, but I was unable to go after high school. I just accepted it and went on with my life. But the desire to attend college would not go away. I would attend night classes wherever I lived. After I married and had a family, the yearning to get an art degree did not lessen. My husband, who was with the Forest Service, was transferred to Missoula, and bingo, there was the U of M, and so accessible at that. I attended school here for several years, all the while living in fear that we would be transferred to another city before I could finish school. And that's what happened. You cannot imagine how distraught I was. I needed a certain amount of credits from UM to graduate here. I lacked that amount, plus some required classes, which in the end I was able to take at University of Wisconsin and transfer them back here. I thought about all kinds of solutions to be able to graduate here. One day, soon after, Walter called me into his office and told me that he'd been thinking about my situation. He suggested that I sign up for the required 12 credits for an independent study of experimental watercolor techniques. I would keep taking incompletes for the course until I completed 75 paintings, at which time I would send them to him, and he would critique them, grade them, and I would receive the credits I needed. I did just that, and he did just that. Sent them back along with a long, meaningful letter, which I still cherish, and I have kept that letter. But I was talking to George Gogas right before this session, and he said that Walter, this was not uncharacteristic of Walter. He would help people all along the way, and he did this for a long time. So I had to finish my paintings before he retired, because when this all occurred, he was planning on retiring in a year. So I really buckled down. that first one. Okay. So these are some of the paintings that I sent back to him for critique, and I'll tell you what the can you see, Gary? Okay. Oh, should I turn the lights off?
Still left on the bottom.
Oh, thank you. So I had to really rack my brain to figure out all kinds of experiments I could muster up. So this one, I used kind of a batik method, and I also stuck it in, covered it with water and stuck it in the freezer so that it would all break up. And so I did the painting first and then stuck it in the freezer. And this is what resulted. So all these little cracks and batik looking seepage. Yeah. And this was a collage. I collected a bunch of Chinese newspapers. What they say, I have no idea. But I carefully collaged some of them on watercolor paper and then did the painting on the rest of it. So I think I used wallpaper paste to get it on there. And then I covered it with acrylic paint, acrylic medium, so that it would be permanent. Because, as you know, newspapers don't last very long. Okay. This, I crumbled up watercolor paper and then stretched it back onto a board, and wherever I just painted it regularly, and the watercolor would seep into the cracks in the paper. So this one won an award in Wisconsin. So, okay. This one is watercolor board and rice paper over the top. I had put it on again with wallpaper paste, and this was smoke Elzers before, what is that, subdivision? So, okay. And then I watercolored over the top of it. Okay. This is, we went to New Orleans, and I took a bunch of pictures of tugboats. I'm a boat person. And did the painting, and then I cut it all apart and treated each section a little differently with a little different color. And then I glued it back together, but kind of offset. And so that was the result. Okay. This, I just went crazy. Did something different that I was not comfortable with. And used pink, which I hate, and just made a mess. Okay. This, I used a lot of salt, and so where the salt was, it sopped up the paint and left white spots all over. And I tried to make it look like a wave breaking. So. Okay. This is also a collage. My grandfather worked here in Bonner and Evero in 1904 on the railroad. And so I kind of did this thing with him in mind. But it's also a collage of Chinese newspapers and the old steam train. There's ink and watercolor and again a collage. So, okay, that's it for that one. Okay. Several years later, after I happily returned to Montana, as it happened, Walter and I had studios in the same building, which is now above the Dana Gallery and the Raven. So I don't know a lot about his extracurricular activities outside of art, but I know that he was a poker player. He didn't hang out in some old smoky back alley, but his poker playing friends were a lot of his professor colleagues, and he of a gentler sort. Walter had a generous heart, but physically a weak one. And he had several surgeries. He had one early on, and then in 1989 he had another surgery. And a week before his surgery, his last surgery, he went around town and settled up all of his debts. So, and I was told this by Bill Hutchison, who owned Da Vinci Galleries. Walter came in and told him that yes, he was going around to everyone and paying all of his bills. And he never made it out of that surgery, sadly. He was only 70 years old, and I was amazed at all he accomplished in those 70 years. So I'll be 72 soon, so I'd better start buckling down. Yeah. To me, he was a very special and dear person who I feel greatly indebted to. I will be forever grateful to Walter for his help. If he had been in Japan, he would have been designated a national treasure. The Japanese regard their revered artists as national treasures, and I think he would have truly been one of them. And at least he's one of our state treasures. Now, I have a few slides of my own. Originally, I had just focused on Walter with his work, but I saw the poster that they came out with for this, and it said they were featuring some of my art. So I thought, okay, I'd better do something really quickly, which was hard because all my slides are on, all my images are on slides which are now ancient and out of date. So I had to do some really fast work. And so I had help digitizing some of the slides, and I fortunately have some of my later work on, I took digital pictures of them, so I did have those, but I don't have most of them. But you don't want to see everything anyway, so I tried to put together what I had, and Al here helped me so much today. So again, I apologize for my technical ability. So this is from one of my shows at the Sutton West. It's just an example of an urban scene. It's We Buy Anything, and it's still around there. I haven't gone in there lately, but I imagine it's just as junky as it ever was. So, okay. If you have any questions, be sure and raise. Okay. This is another urban scene, Wardens, and this was also part of the same show. Okay. I have done a series of farmers market scenes. Some of them are quite large, and some of them I did a lot of smaller ones. Like Walter, wanted to make things affordable. So, okay. This was a large one. And I would go to the farmer's market and just take snapshots of people. A lot of times I use the same old backgrounds, but change the foreground, the people, the settings. Okay. Another farmer's market scene of one of the booths there. This was a commission I did a couple years ago. Parker's Produce. That gentleman there is Mr. Parker. And at one time he was a market master. So this was a commission for his daughter. Okay. Flowers. I like to do flowers if they're not literal. I like to kind of to give my impression of them. So this is a farmer's market, group of one of the buckets of flowers that I found at the market, and the next one is too. So this was a national show. So, okay. People. I don't know whether you know Shooty, what's his name? Schubert. John Schubert. He was a band director for District 1, and he was always so animated. I tried to capture that. So this is a couple of a duo that used to play at the farmers market a lot and for weddings, and they had beautiful music, and I tried to capture the spirit of the market with them. Okay. Okay, you can go to the next one. I had hundreds of slides, so you're really lucky that this is only a few. Okay. This one was in a national show and it won an award. This is the harbor at Dayton, the boatyard at Dayton. I changed the background a little bit, but okay. This is a farm in McCall, Idaho that doesn't exist anymore because there's a subdivision there. So, and a lot of it's kind of sad. I'm glad I have some of these because they are no longer pastures. They're big subdivisions with summer homes that people aren't living in very often. Okay. This is from a show I had at Sutton West, The Narrows. Okay. This was a commission for a woman who has a summer home up in Flathead Lake. Erin, do you recognize that?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Redbud Ridge. Yeah, so kind of an impressionistic interpretation. Okay. This is Bitterroot River, and I've been wanting to do a show of the waterways in the Northwest or Montana, and I haven't been able to get any further than this. Okay. Okay. I'm very partial to nature subjects and just, you know, kind of intimate looks. So this is cottonwood leaves, which we see all the time, but to me they're kind of very artistic. Okay. Floating leaves. This was done for a booklet done by the Montana Watercolor Society. Okay. More floating leaves. I find myself very enthralled with water scenes, looking down into the water. I think that comes from canoeing, because it's so restful to look down in the water and just drift up here. Okay. This was an experiment done by using paper that is no longer in stock anymore. But I just splashed, and this is how I do a lot of paintings, just started by splashing colors onto watercolor paper and then pressing plastic or something over it, see what happens, and then do the composition from whatever's there on the paper. Okay. This was done for an environmental show. It's called Nothing Does It Like 7-Up. It was against the 7-Up mines up the Blackfoot. So I started out with live cutthroat trout and dead ones at the bottom. Okay. Floating leaves again. This was done for Five Valleys Land Trust auction. And I think that's it for my work. So I wanted, oh, not quite. Leaves again in the snow, melting snow, after a Chinook wind.
That was it.
Okay. So, do you have any questions about Walter that I might be able to answer?
Thank you so much for coming.
I can relax now. So, thank you for coming.
So great.
Bye.